Well, welcome everybody. My name's Dani Stehlik. I'm a Professor of Sociology. I'm Chair of the Rural Industries R&D Corporation, and I chair the advisory panel for Living Well Longer. And it's been my great pleasure to meet some of you over the last day and a bit and listen to the fabulous research that you're all doing here. It's my pleasure this afternoon to introduce you to Alex Kalache, who's joined us from the as a Global Ambassador for Ageing and also as the Director of the International Longevity Centre in Brazil. Now, Alex and I are going to have a little conversation, and then I will invite you to ask us some questions. Our theme, I think I'm going to say, Alex, our theme is disruption. And disruption really means that we have to start rethinking the way that we're providing, thinking, speaking, researching aged care. Alex, there's been a dramatic rise in life expectancy in it's both society's greatest achievement but its greatest challenge. Shall we begin by talking about that?
Yes, indeed. Thank you all to come and for your kind introduction and for the fabulous, very invigorating 2 days that we had interacting with many of you, looking at the research that you are doing and forefront. So I'm very enthusiastic to be here as part of this board of well-being and living longer. And I'm sorry to contradict you.
Oh, you don't think the dramatic rise in life expectancy?
I do. What I don't agree is to associate the word disruption.
Oh, okay.
I don't think it is disruption. It is life course. It is terrific, the fact that we are living longer like never before. Look at me. I was not programmed to be here. I was born in Brazil with a life expectancy of 43. It's not disruptive that I'm now going to see babies born in Brazil living to 77. It's not disruptive to society if we have the right policies to embrace aging from a very positive perspective. It is a challenge. We need to look at the way we are providing care to those that need care. Not all older people need care. It's actually the minority. But we are still seeing older people disrupting our lives. You know, they're nonsense. They can be a burden. They bring all sorts of demands that we are not prepared anymore. Why? Because we have not developed the right policies to face this longevity revolution. But I'm just provoking because I think that the word disruption is, in my sense, negative. I may be taking it negatively because English is not my mother language.
Okay, well, let me put that into some Australian context, because it's a word that's emerged over the last little while as a way of describing societal shifts and changes. So disruption is seen as an energy, which means that society has to think about things. So I'm using it in that sense, in a positive sense. And also because, as we've heard over the last couple of days, the ageing of the next 20 years of societies generally will be very different because of the baby boomers. And I actually see that energy of disruption being something positive that the baby boomers are going to bring to longevity. Yeah. Do you want to talk about that?
Absolutely. And I think that it is really my ears that are not used to Australian English. But okay, if it is in that sense, we have something that's unique, that we have the privilege of living. And we are developing a new social construct of what is to be old. When I say we, I'm talking about mostly baby boomers, a big generation, this is why boom, with higher health status than any generation before, also with a higher level of education, information. And also, immediately after the war, and this is why there was this boom, societies were affluent. And for 20 years, we have this generation that many of you here
Like us.
belong. What is happening is that we are now repeating our life course history. Back in the 1950s and 60s, we created something that was unique. It was a transition between childhood and adulthood, which did not exist before. Before the Second World War, even in very rich countries like Australia, your parents had to work in order to survive, to eat. Same would apply in North America or Europe. Then as we came in big numbers, in good health, more well-informed, and with affluence, money in the pocket, we didn't have to work. We could survive without having to work at the age of 12 or 14. And we created this space, this transition, which we call adolescence. We're all familiar with adolescence. I don't have to explain what is adolescence. But if I would be speaking here 50 years ago, I would have to explain what adolescence is. Was not in the dictionary, in the way we understand today. Activism, turning the table, rebelling, experimenting, rock and roll, the Beatles, oral contraceptives, sexual liberation. It's all here written in my DNA. How do you think that I'm going to age the same way that my parents, or let alone my grandparents? It's going to be different. How different? Wait another 15 years and look at the dictionary, and you will find a new word, like adolescence, with the meaning we have today, was not there in the 50s or 60s. And we are going to find this new word in 15, 20 years, which I call gerontolescence. Put together gerontology, geronto, in Greek, old, and essence. So this transition that we first created and gave to you, you young guy there looking at me. Yeah, we have given you something unique. If we are not before you, you wouldn't have had adolescence in the way you have experienced. And now we are preparing the terrain again to give you in a golden tray this fantastic period, which is not compressed into 5 or 6 years as adolescence is. It's going to be 20, 25, 30 years. Wonderful. If society allows us to contribute to society, then it's going to be very positive. If society doesn't, we are going to force society to do, because that is what we have done throughout our lives. We are pushing new barriers, new grounds, and we're going to reinvent the social construct of what is old age, like it or not. So be prepared.
So, Alex, if we put our finger on the future, as it were, where will we see some changes? Or are we already seeing globally some changes?
The first thing change is visual. Have you heard of the girl from Ipanema? That song? Do you know how old she is today? 76. So it's visual. The icon of Rio, my hometown, Copacabana, the girls and boys, strong and war festivals, it is also there. But Copacabana today is Brazil in 30 years. We already have in Copacabana, because the old remain there and their children and grandchildren move to other trendy beaches and residential areas. So Copacabana is Brazil 30 years from now. So the immediate change that we're going to see is a much older society. Mm-hmm. The Copacabana of my childhood, I was born there. Just to give you an idea, I was born in a maternity that today is still a hospital, but it is a geriatric hospital. So I have great chance to end up where I first started. It is visual. It is happening as we speak. So if you want to see Copacabana as it was 50, 60 years ago, with lots of babies, children, pregnant women, nannies, push chairs, and so on, now you have wheelchairs and walkers and carers walking with older people. And many older people that you don't even see because they are isolated and trapped at home. So the first thing is visual. The second thing that is going to happen as a consequence of a world that is aging so fast is that we're going to have an impact on all aspects of society. It's not only for the health care. It's not only for care of the elderly. It has to do with the way we love, with the way we work, the way we get information. It is transformational. We'll see a generation that is much more familiar with information technology. They will blog, they will tweet, I'm doing this. And this is the future that we're going to see, this impact of this wave. Some people call it tsunami. It's not a tsunami. Tsunami is something that is inevitably destructive. What we see is a tidal wave that is going to be positive or negative depending on the space that society will create with the policies that will enable that people like us will continue to contribute to society rather than to go home. When Bismarck created Social Security, 2 or 3 years of pension, if so. And he created, because these people that were 60 and over were few. In Germany, at the end of the 19th century, life expectancy was 46. So these few people that didn't have energy, and the work was energetic and demanding physical energy, strength. And he said, it's silly, because they are not productive, and we paid them full salary. So let them go home, and we give a little money. So economically made sense. Instead of paying full salary, you would pay a little money, and they would die 2, 3 years later because medicine didn't have anything to offer to their chronic diseases problems, which were the same that we have today: hypertension, diabetes, osteomuscular problems, cardiovascular, and so on. So that is the change that we're going to see. Not 2 or 3 years, but 30 years, even more, after retirement, and we have to tap this natural resource that is being wasted because society is imposing retirement, obsolete 19th century policies as if they would still apply today.
And the urbanisation, the global urbanisation, the transition from rural to cities and to regions, this is also a huge impact on this next phase of the life cycle. Do you think they're ready? Do you think cities and regions are ready for the tidal wave?
And if there are two important trends, demographic trends this century, the first is aging. We are talking about that. If you look at 1950, there were 14 million people aged 80 plus. In 2050, 100 years, 1 century, there will be 396 million. It's an increase of 28 times. The population as a whole in this century will increase less than 4 times. On the other hand, we have urbanization. You have a trend worldwide. In fact, 2007 was when the United Nations declared that there were more people living in urban areas than in rural areas, for the first time ever. So it's a different world. I was born and brought up in a country that had 1/3 of the population living in urban areas, and was 1/3 of 50 million. Today we have 87% of the population living in urban areas, but it is 87% of 210 million. It's a completely different country. The urbanization was very rapid, compressed, chaotic. Yes, we have favelas, we have inequalities, we have lots of problems. They're all there to be seen, visible, but it is an urban society, and it's not going to reverse. People are not going back to rural areas once they urbanize. At least we haven't seen this experience ever. They may go back in old age to age further and to die where they were brought up, but that is different. It's not a process of reversing urbanization. Australia is also an urban society, similar percentage of people living in urban areas. So if you bring together these two trends, more and more and more older people, more and more and more living in urban areas, we have to adjust the urban environment. And this is what we did at WHO when I was the director there until 2008. We launched the Age-Friendly Cities movement. How to make an environment like this more age-friendly in terms of housing, transportation, access to services, access to information, knowledge, lifelong learning, access to work, because some people, not so much here, but throughout the world, hundreds of millions are in old age or aging soon and need to work in order to survive. They don't have decent pension and income. So the access to work, all these things that make our lives more pleasant and secure, that we have to adjust when the population is aging. The other thing that is important is that I'm not saying it's senior friendly, I'm saying that it is age friendly. The focus is on the word age. Capture this beauty in English, because we cannot say the same in Latin languages. We have to say friendly to older people. No, it's not. And then we add, well, it's society for all ages. No, age friendly encapsulates the message that it is friendly to older people, and it's going to likely to be friendly to everybody. An environment, say a bus that you get in and out more easily because you are old, is going to be easier for a pregnant woman, for a teenager with a rucksack in the back, or someone that hurt his or her knee playing football. And it's going to be much easier for everybody. That's what we want, is not to orchestrate a war between generations.
And with the global challenge goal of transforming lives and regions, in Australia there's age-friendly cities, aren't there? Tell us how you would imagine an Illawarra that was aged-friendly. How different would it be? There would be things happening here already, wouldn't there, that would be helping that process?
But we have to make it appropriate. And this is part of, I had the fortune, the privilege of being the thinker in residence for the government of South Australia in 2011, 2013. And my final report, so I visited South Australia 4 times over a period of 2 years, so there were intervals, there were partners to my residence. It was a way for me to engage and be embedded, but also for my partners in the residence to get used to my ideas and to see what could flourish. And the idea was to create South Australia age-friendly, not only Adelaide, not only the metropolitan area, but to have right across the state policies that would make it easier for people living in the urban areas, as well as in regional centers like Whyalla, or more sparse communities, because this is a reality of a very large country with a very small population. You may not think that it's small, it's incredibly small. We are a little smaller than Brazil with 10% of the population. So we can export lots of Brazilians and see what is going to happen. And that is the reality that we would like, is to see what is going to be specific to Whyalla, to a regional center, or to metropolitan area in Adelaide. And we started this process, which means listening to the voices of other persons locally. You cannot guess what is important for them. You have to go there and listen to their voices, often hidden, because there is discrimination, older people are a burden, they are like that. No, let us first listen to the voices and engage the authorities so that we have a bottom-up and a top-down, and involve all the sectors of society. You have to involve the academia, because you are going to do the research well, you are interested to publish good papers, so you're going to measure. WHO has just launched measuring the impact of age-friendly cities, so it is measurable, and it is embedded in a philosophy. When I was in WHO, we launched the Active Aging Policy Framework, 2002, We have revisited that document, incorporating new thinking, new evidence, and this published by my center in Brazil. And by the way, I am the president of the IOC Brazil. I'm also the president of the Alliance of International Longevity Centers, including here in Australia, in the UK, in the States, in China, in India, and so on. So what we're talking about is a global movement. We started the Age-Friendly Cities in 35 cities. Today we have over 1,800 cities that have embraced one way or the other. But the policies, they have to go above the city. Because what could the mayor of Waiala do in terms of public transportation or housing or access to jobs?
Exactly.
It is limited. So we have to go to a state level, if not national level. So my challenge to the South Australia government, which was there in this report, has not yet been taken by the South Australia government because there was a change in premier. That is a difficulty. You know, democracy is boring because you change everything, and the new one will have a different priority. But it has now been picked up by Queensland, and I'm going to Brisbane to carry on with the work there to see Age-Friendly Queensland. And next week I'm going to be in New Zealand, and we also launched in New Zealand, much smaller, small population, the Age-Friendly New Zealand national policy frameworks, always with this positive look at aging. We are, the most important natural source that this country has. It's not iron ore, it's not charcoal, it's not grains. No, it's people and the energy that is wasted because increasingly you have this proportion of people that are aging, this gerontolescent, that could be contributors to the society, but are ditched. And if we could use this, there was a study by the Economic Commission for Australia about 4 or 5 years ago, calculating that there would be an injection of $15 billion if people like us would be allowed to continue to contribute positively to society. But it has to be with excitement. You cannot tell somebody that has had a very boring life and work until the age of 60, saying, guess what, you're going to work another 7 years. No, it has to be with lifelong learning, investing on health and participation. You need to make life more exciting, because life, when I was born, was 100 meters sprint. You would have to come with all your energy to get to the end. Today is a marathon. And for a marathon, we need strategies, we need a good plan, we need to look at our resources so that we get to the end in good shape and enjoying, if we are to get there.
And so I heard you say a little while ago that one of the advantages of a aged-friendly environment and taking into account all the factors is having a university as part of that, that future. And so the Illawarra offers a great opportunity because the university is already embedded in its community. We've heard over the last 2 days some exciting work that's being done. What are the advantages of having a university as part of the whole strategy?
The first is that the university is a tremendous source of new ideas, innovation, or it should be. You know, that is what the leadership, the thinking in a small city, a small community like Wollongong and Illawarra as a region. So you're much luckier than big cities, Melbourne, Sydney, where the university or universities are more diluted. You have immediate links with your community. I was saying to Richard Fleming that one opportunity they would have here with his interest on dementia-friendly, do a scheme like in the UK, people are doing at a much larger scale, training people, ordinary people, shopkeepers or officers or bus drivers and so on, to be more aware of the challenge of dementia, dementia-friendly. and they become ambassadors, they are more aware, they will be more tolerant, they will teach their neighbors, their children, their parents. I have had experiences in London, phenomenal, of older people really being included with dementia in the community as the most natural thing. So I'm not talking about hours and hours of training. It's quick, and a lot of social media, it is disseminating these concepts that, you know, it is part of life, that some of us are, like or not, going to age with dementia. So that is the opportunity for a university like Wollongong that is close links, because almost everybody, I would imagine, in Wollongong will have a neighbor or a friend or a relative that either is a student or is staff of the university, because this is very central to the life of this community. So you can do experiments and measure the impact much more easily than if you're in a big city. And not to forget that in Illawarra region, you also have regional centers that are more distant. And we need to reach out to see what can we do to improve the quality of people as they age.
I've lived all over Australia and lived in many different regions and worked in universities, and the power of the relationship with the community is, you can't, it's just amazing. And so I've also worked in cities, universities, where there's no connection at all with the community. The community is an abstract idea.
Or an ivory tower.
Or an ivory tower, or it's an artificial thing where the community becomes an artificial petri dish rather than the reality, you know, the lived reality. One of the things that I learned in my time working in universities is the power of the multidisciplinary research. Now, your first degree was a medical degree, but your PhD was in aging, wasn't it?
Yeah,
So
my
you're
master's degree was in social science, and my PhD was on gerontology.
Gerontology, yeah. And so your work experiences led you to partner with a variety of people.
Yeah.
So you embody a kind of multidisciplinary ideal.
Yeah. When I first finished my medical training many years ago, I first went to make sure that everybody would understand that, yes, I can be a clinical doctor with the stethoscope around my neck. I'm able to do it. So for 4 years I was working in the university as a tutor and then as a junior lecturer in clinical medicine. And then I said, okay, now I have proved to everybody, including my parents, because they wanted me to be a medical doctor, but they wouldn't understand a public health doctor. Not even my daughter, many years later, when she was 4 or 5, she asked me, Dad, are you a doctor? I said, yeah. You sure? Yeah. But you are not dressed in white with that funny thing around your neck. So that classical vision of what to be a doctor, I had done that. And then I could go and do social sciences related to medicine, which had been my passion. And it was when I moved to London to do my master's degree there. And then I discovered I was in an aged country. And that was fascinating. And it clicked my interest. And also I did research to see what are the determinants of working on aging and having job satisfaction. The first thing that came in the research that I did in 2 research, one with geriatricians that had already established themselves as geriatricians, and the other looking at medical students' attitudes before and after they had an attachment to a geriatric medicine ward. In both research, the common denominator is that if you had a positive experience with older people in your family, in childhood and adolescence, you would be happy working with older people. Otherwise, it would be much more difficult. Attitudes. I had the privilege of being brought up in a multi-generational, loud Mediterranean. Each of my grandparents come from a different Mediterranean country, so I could choose all these older people around. My grandmother had 13 siblings. My grandfather 17. So there are more older people that I can cope with. And it was terrific because then when I realized that, yeah, if you have this positive relationship, you will be happy, I never looked back. It was professionally a suicide to talk about global aging back in 1975. But I had the conviction that it was important, that all countries would age, that Brazil was going to age, that we were going to live longer, and that was the most extraordinary revolution. In 1975, when I left Brazil, fertility rates in Brazil were 5.8, an average of virtually 6 children per woman. Before the year 2000, it had reached below 2. In 25 years, it had gone down to below replacement level and has remained below replacement level ever since. That is the speed of the longevity revolution. Not only that we're living longer, but there are fewer and fewer and fewer children. And we men expect that you women not only work, but look after children. This is why you're having fewer children. And then later, you will look after your parents, my parents, your parents-in-law, and look after me once I get older. And you have the very bad habit of choosing older husbands. It has to change. Otherwise, you will be in widowhood for long years. We have to change this mentality. It's to do with the culture of care, which goes back to your very first question. Yes, we need to develop the culture of care in response to this longevity revolution. We have to learn how to be part of the equation and not only recipients of care, and change completely the way we structure our lives. Because the way we are doing is more of the same since millennia.
Yes.
It doesn't work.
No. And so from the idea that there aren't that many medical professionals that I have met that have taken up the social sciences and combined the two around a particular problem. Take us on the journey that then took you from the masters into the WHO. How did that happen?
Well, I did my master's degree, as I said, in London. The second year was a research-based project, so it was not one compressed master's degree. You had a research-based dissertation, and it was on aging, and it was looking at the factors that, the determinants of choosing geriatric medicine. I learned that when I first arrived in London, I was so lucky that 83% of geriatricians in London, in Britain, were from South Asia. They were Indian doctors from Pakistan, from Bangladesh. And anyway, they were considered to be second-hand doctors that would go to the second-hand specialty, because the British trained doctors were not interested in geriatric medicine. They are not interested in care. They are interested in cure, to make miracles, to save lives. And not necessarily that the Indian or Pakistani doctors were interested in care. It's just that it was left over, and it was a quick way to make a career. So that is why I got into training attitudes and then looking at medical students' attitudes, which I measured in all the groups that I measured. There were better attitudes towards old age and aging before they were exposed to geriatric patients than after, a month later. Because you are exposing these very young medical students to death, to neglect, to confusion, to depression, to deafness. They cannot communicate well. And they would come back to the same point. Are you surprised that our attitudes are worse now? You have taken us away from the glorification of acute and glamour of high tech and put us here, end of life. We are not used to talk to older people. For some of us, this is the very first time that we speak to an older person for more than half an hour. It scares us. And this is why our attitudes are worse now. So the combination of all this call attention in Oxford, and I was invited to apply. Not to apply, I didn't even know I was applying. When I realized I was recruited, and I did my PhD alongside clinical scholarship. So and then was teaching there in social medicine. Discovered that nobody at the University of Oxford at the time had any interest on aging. Although they recruited me, I didn't have with whom to dialogue with.
Yes,
so 7 or 8 years later, I went back to London, to the School of Public Health, where I set up an international program on public health implications of aging. Always looking at health within the context, and that was the teaching that Ottawa Charter in health promotion was emanating. Health is created in the context of everyday's life. It's not the medical encounter. It's where you work, where you live, where you meet your friends are. That is the environment.
Yep.
And then I brought this perspective into aging from a life course perspective. If we ask all in the city, everywhere in the world, can grow older, accumulating 4 capitals that are essential for us to have quality of life as we age. We need the vital capital, it's health. And health comes first. This is universal. Second is knowledge. If we stop learning, we are going to be obsolete. If you continue to work and to learn and to be challenged, it's not only for us professionals in the academia. You take a car mechanic that until 20 years ago, all that the person needed to know was mechanics. If he or she has not learned electronics, he has been redundant, has lost his job. So knowledge and health. Then you need to accumulate finances. And our financial literacy is still appalling. We have to make this part of the life course so that we can have a perspective of how to ensure, or at least to try, to attempt, to have enough in our old age. That is going to be much longer than it used to be. And the final is social capital, because there will be a point in our lives that we may need care, and then we may realize that we don't have that social capital. We have not invested in friends, in the family, in the neighbors. And this requires resilience. It requires all the traits that we don't know how to develop. My father-in-law died 2 years ago at the age of 104. Just before his death, he was already in the final admission to hospital. He was very frail, but cognitively speaking, fine. My son, who lives in London, was with him, and then the nurse came into the room, didn't recognize my son, was not familiar with him, and said, "Oh, who are you?" And the old man from his bed, before my son replied, said, very frail, with a weak voice, "Oh, he is my grandson." "Oh, yes, of course, because remind me, how many children do you have?" And his reply, "Oh, so far only 3.
So
That sense of humor, that optimistic way to look at life has helped him. He was surrounded by people. He did have the social capital that we need. So it is investing in those 4 capitals, the health, the knowledge, the social capital, and the financial capital. And maybe now that I'm learning more and more the importance of resilience, we should add resilience as a 5th capital that is emerging as so important.
Well, I'm going to open it up for a bit of questioning. Are you okay with that? So have we got any questions from the floor for Alex?
Or comments.
Or comments, yeah, absolutely. I'm looking at the front row. Yes, a quick question?
Yes, Simon Ackerman. In terms of how we might measure successful ageing, I'm a health economist, so I've seen all within study type analyses, and they're always at the individual level, not at the community level. Do you think that approaches where you look at kind of network effects, where you look at those forms of social capital, the forms of health knowledge capital that can be built with health promotion, prevention, but also basic social capital building, are the ways to kind of measure the success of these kind of successful agents?
Yeah, we will look for indicators that will reflect that. Plus, one thing that is essential, and you are in a lucky country, you have a commissioner for the rights of older people, Susan Ryan. You have a focus in this country on rights. Right for what? To participate. Because you may accumulate all the capitals and then you don't have the right and nobody is going to give you the opportunity. So to measure, yeah, we will need to have all these 5 capitals, if I'm including now resilience, but also you have to see how it fits the society and if society is giving you the opportunity. And it's not because we're having a chat just before the last session, but I have here measuring the impact of age-friendly cities. That is a way to take the active aging policy framework with these 4 pillars that I described, translate it into the city and the dimensions of, as I mentioned, transportation, housing, civic participation, the right to learn, the right to work, and so on. And then you transform this into indicators. But don't ever forget that you have to get the indicators from the voice of the older people to see what they value locally. Because what older people in my home city in Rio value may be very different from what people here value. So you have to put the finger on the pulse and listen to the voices all the time.
We had another question from that row, yes.
I was just interested to get your view on how would you, I'm just thinking of the difference between the younger generation and the older generation. The younger generation has a new impetus into things and really has a view of older generation as being a bit fuddy-duddy and old, and I'm wondering how you would engage the younger generation in accepting and appreciating more focus on the older person.
Yeah, thank you for the question, because when I say age-friendly, and I have already said it's not senior-friendly, we want to build a society for all ages. We want to foment and forge, facilitate a dialogue. What we are doing now, which we were not doing in 2006, when we first started the 35 cities research, we are now listening to the voice of older people and then fostering the dialogue with public forum, where the voices of older people are exposed to young people with the old, so that we can have this public forum, so that we can have the real dialogue. Because face it, in Australia, like in most of the developed world, and increasingly in countries like Brazil, people live in nuclear families. There is very little contact between generations. It is formal. It will be in birthdays or weddings, if not in funerals. And you end up losing that intimacy that was there. And we're not going back to the traditional extended family experiences. That's past. But for the familiarity between the young and the old to continue, we will have to be more creative. Where are older people in the planning and the thinking of this university, which basically deals with young, but you don't have the presence of old? So that is why creating age-friendly universities, where there is not only opportunities for people as they age to continue to learn, but to be engaged, to be part of the campus and the life. Otherwise, we will fragment. You have kids in kindergarten, young children in schools, teenagers doing whatever they do, and you fragment everything, and then you end up with older people in their niche. And this could be a disaster. And in many societies already happening. We need a focus to do and foster this intergenerational dialogue. Otherwise, it will not happen naturally.
Thank you. I'll take the one at the back, and then this one, and then this one. Right.
Thank you, Heather Yatman. Very pleased to hear what you're saying, and I'm just wondering, sometimes these changes to look at things differently need a trigger, an event that occurs or a trigger. In your experience, are there particular triggers that get communities, whether it's the structures in communities, local governments or universities or whatever, to consider ageing as a real issue? What are those triggers that we can look for or in fact generate?
There are many triggers. In different societies or cities, I have seen different triggers, triggering the change. It could be the media, which is very powerful. It could be an ambassador, a champion, a Jane Fonda. We brought her to Brazil 3 years ago to talk about her latest autobiography book. This woman epitomized what is the life course that we are seeing emerging. You reinvent yourself. You're not going to be the same forever. You're not going to be the sex symbol you wear in Barbarella. But you're not going to be the anti-Vietnam War and champion activist that she was. You're not forever going to be the keep fit queen making lots of money. You're not going to be Miss Ted Turner? The CNN, and at that point she was playing the wife. And then she comes back into acting, and then she starts writing about aging with property. You know, she spent time in all the important gerontological centers in the States, and then she writes a book which is called The Third Act. And she says in the book that as an actress, she can say this with property, that when you go to a play, usually 3 acts, it's only in the 3rd act that the events of the 1st and 2nd start to make sense. That is old age. That is the insight that you get, saying, oh. And she writes this beautifully, and she speaks about aging. She's 78, and she says, yes, I have done plastic surgery. Because people are coming to me and say, you look tired. And I was not tired. I was not feeling tired. And then I discovered that I would do this. Oh, look, I'm less tired. And this is what exactly she did. So projecting what she was feeling inside. Also paying a price to things that she has done before, this life course perspective, including too much keep fit. And she has replaced the hips and the knees. So it could be an ambassador like her. It could be a celebrity. It could be a university.
Yes.
It could be a mayor that is enlightened and could see that perhaps with vested interest, older people vote and influence the way their younger relatives vote. So all these are triggers. But you have to forge a very strong alliance with traditional media and also with social media so that these ideas can be disseminated quickly.
In the middle, yes.
First, a note to supplement your story of your grandfather up to 104. I heard an interview recently with a woman of 106 who was asked, what is the best thing about being 106? She said, no peer pressure. But my question, however, is about development countries, but the very poorest countries, where there is greatest inequity. How would you see the entry points to be different? And how would you see a strategic difference in the way that you dealt with sort of issues otherwise you might deal with in Adelaide or developed countries or ones that are got a much further developed equity between the people?
It's very difficult. It's a big challenge. We, more than here, have to make the effort to make sure that society will walk together and that can see first that the best that can happen to you is to age. The alternative is only one. Are you interested? And the second is to make sure that when we are talking about age-friendly, more than here, we are not talking about senior-friendly. Brazil today has 12.5% of people over the age of 60, and Canada, to be in the same continent, is 25, twice as many. By the year 2050, Brazil will have 31% and Canada 30. They are going to increase the proportion from 25 to 30. We are going to increase from 12.5 to 31. That is where the challenge is. In a country that is not like Canada, that has the house in order in terms of public education, health, the environment, etc. And they are very worried about aging. Imagine what it is for a country with inequalities, unemployment. We are seeing a tremendous new challenge in public health, which is entirely environmental. A virus that we didn't know until 18 months ago. It was probably brought someone to the World Cup, and it's now spreading like virus. We don't have any immunological response to Zika. Zika is a region in Africa, and it was probably a French guy that went to French Polynesia that bought the diseases already present there before Brazil, that brought it to the World Cup. The world is globalized. We have to learn from each other. And there are things that you are doing here on aging that may be of interest. Others that my friend, health economists, say don't even touch because there is no chance that you can implement this there. It's not going to be cost effective. It is in Adelaide, but it's not here. So, yeah, it is much more of a challenge. But we cannot, well, we can. If we have an epidemic that will bring down the life expectancy in Brazil from 77 back to 43, we'll solve the problem. But that's not what we want.
No.
We want to continue to age, but we also want to get and give opportunities to everybody to age well.
Great.
Excuse me, maybe permitted just one follow-up question. I also worked for the United Nations the last 10 years before I retired, responsible in Asia. The thing which always worked for me was rebuilding, was helping the society, the communities themselves to find their own voice and to build that strength and relations between them. From that you could build so many other things. And that to me was fundamentally the way that what works in developing countries. And my question therefore is, can you see a way in which these sorts of social processes can be reinforced in terms of general national strategies in countries like that?
We are trying this. We may not succeed, but that's exactly what the global movement with 1,800 cities, many of them in India, in Africa, in Latin America, listening to the local voices, prioritizing and building the policies that will work, and evaluating the interventions that you do. I am entirely sold to the idea of community development and building on the resources of the community to overcome the problems and to recognize the assets that you have locally.
Excellent. Thank you. Richard, you're next.
Professor Kalache, my question is...
I call you Richard, you call me Alex.
Alex, my question is posed with tongue-in-cheek. You've presented a picture of an enormous challenge that we face, and we face that because of the advantages that our generation has given to the younger generation. And you look back on a time of great revolution, of sexual revolution and all sorts of revolution in the 60s and 70s, when universities were very different to what they are now. And my question to you is there something we can do to our universities to recreate a sense of revolution that will contribute to the changes that we need to make in order to fulfill your vision of a gerund to essence?
It's a great
It
final
is very
question.
difficult because we experience and we know the life that we had. It's one life course. It is unique to me. All I know, Richard, is that back in the 1960s, I did my medical training from 65 to 1970. The military regime in Brazil started in 64. I was the very first cohort under a curtailment of our rights. We didn't have any rights. We were prosecuted. Many of us were arrested. Some were actually killed by the military regime. And this is in my DNA. All I know is what I have learned then, and my commitment for the rest of my life, because it is formative years. No wonder it is formative years. We had a cause, and we were so absolutely sure that we were going to change that and for better. And 50 years later, God, 50 years later, I look at my country and I see some of the people of my age that were elected democratically, and use their power and position to rob the country. This is what we're seeing today. There is an unprecedented crisis, which is not economic, that we can overcome. It's not institutional, it's not political, it's moral. And that is very disappointing, because it is the legacy we're leaving to younger people. That makes them very disillusioned and without hope. So honestly, I don't know what's the answer. I thought back when I was a student that we were going to change the world for better. And so often you look at this crazy world and see, look at what the United States is about to do to elect someone. I'm not going there.
No, I don't think we should go there. I don't think we should go there. I'm going to take one more question. I don't think we should go down the path of the American presidential election. Yes.
Yes, so I'm thinking across generations now, and looking back to the changes that have influenced women socially. So my mother, for example, lost her job when she got married. Women were not allowed to work and marry. And then it was difficult for women to have careers and work. So you had a career or you had children. And now, of course, we have childcare not perfect, but things are changing. But those things change because people fought for them. So where is the fight coming for the aged people, for the gerontologists? Are we looking at a revolution?
Yeah. We are not included in society. We are discriminated all the time. We are considered, like you said, past old. We have to, the revolution is coming exactly from a rights-based approach. This is why I commend you in Australia to have a commissioner for the rights of older people. And Susan Ryan knows what she's talking about. She has been a politician. She is experienced. She's old herself. So she has a voice with authority. That is where the revolution is coming, is listening to voices and listening to the rights. Unfortunately, at a global level, this is not happening. Why? Because at the United Nations, and I now speak as an ambassador for the largest NGO civil society organization based in London called Help Age International. At global level, we go to the UN, we go to New York, and we developing countries, but also the activists from the developed world, and say we need a convention on the rights of older persons, the same way that we needed a convention on the rights of people with disabilities or the rights of women and children and immigrants and you name it. The only group that is excluded are the older people. Mm-hmm. We don't have our rights recognized because developed countries don't allow us. Because you, developed countries, are saying, no, we have our housing law, we have all the legal framework, but we don't. And 83% of older people are going to live in developing countries by the year 2050. That is what we need to prepare the house in order for the majority, not for the developed countries. And the reason why you don't want a convention is because you don't want to be signatories of a convention that would have to translate the rights into services, because if you have a right, if service should be there, and this is an economic argument, it has nothing to do with ideology. It's not that people in developed countries are not convinced, it's because you are being selfish, not extending what you have got to developing countries. And it is amazing, you go to the debates at the UN, all developed countries, close friends.
Mm.
And we get there screaming, but there is no way we are going to have a UN convention if we continue to see the opposition from the whole of Europe, North America, Australia, and Japan, and put New Zealand.
And so, full circle, we need some disruption in the way that I believe we need it. And, you know, we can do that at the local level. We can do that through transforming the regions. We can do that through our students, and we can do it through our research. So, Alex, thank you very much. And will you join me in thanking Alex?